Ninth Commandment, Part 4, still important. Whenever we look into this ninth commandment here, in order to figure out if it is something that we still are doing or not, we are needing to be looking into the New Testament verses to see what it has to say about this commandment of false witnesses. So to start, we are going to look into Mark chapter 10, verse 19, in which it says, "You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery, do not kill, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not defraud, honor your father and your mother." This verse here is one that is repeated again in some of the other gospel records, like over in Luke chapter 18, verse 20. Although these two are worded ever so slightly different, they are both pretty much the same word for word. And most importantly, their meaning is the same here for these verses. In this verse, it talks about remembering the commandments, which of course is in reference to the 10 Commandments. Most of these here, and the ones that we've talked about already, how we have got to this false witness, one which we can see that has made it to this list with all the rest. We can still see this false witness is no exception to the rest of the commandments that made it to the list in this verse. Sin is still sin, which is why it is able to be on this same list here with stuff like killing, honoring one's parents, because when it comes to God and a spiritual list of commandments that we are needing to follow, this ninth commandment here is not being a false witness, is one that is just as serious and that we are needing to be doing. While these verses are still referencing and talk about the importance behind truthfulness in things like legal proceedings, this commandment here is still important in everything that we do. We are being told that we need to not lie and be truthful in all of our communications. This can be further emphasized through verses like Matthew chapter 5, verse 37, in which it says, "But let your word be yes, yes, no, no. For whatever is more than these comes from evil." By this verse, it is a call from Jesus calling us, our followers, to be a much higher standard, in which we are told that a simple affirmation or denial should be sufficient. Adding to this point is that we as Christians are supposed to be trustworthy, and our integrity should be enough for others to believe that our yeses actually mean yes, and our no's actually mean no. This same theme is talked about over again in James chapter 5, verse 12. The way that this verse over in James ends with, "Lest you fall into condemnation." Through this ending, we are able to receive a warning by this commandment of not lying and speaking freely. Just through this phrase here, it is able to serve as a reminder that not only the moral, but also the spiritual consequences of failing to uphold truthfulness. In 1 John chapter 1, verse 6, "If we say that we have fellowship with him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth." Through this verse, we are able to see the kind of opposites that are being presented through it. It starts off by talking about being in fellowship, showing the relationship with God, not just meaning that he is our friend or buddy, but instead a much deeper and a more intimate connection with God. When we look into this word of fellowship that is found in this verse, the Greek word for it is able to signify a partnership or shared life. However, when we get into the next part of this verse, it talks about walk in darkness. Darkness is symbolic to living in sin and moral error, all of which is contrary to God's nature, which is light. Walking in darkness suggests a lifestyle that is inconsistent with the teachings of Christ that we can find in the Bible, found over in verses like Ephesians chapter 5, verses 8 through 11, which we are called to live as children of light. Now we get to fully understand this verse here because if we recap real quick, if we have fellowship with God and walk in darkness, these two things are opposites, as we have talked about and discussed so far, which is why whenever we get to the end of this verse, it states that if all of this is true so far, that we lie and do not practice the truth. By this phrase, we can see that it indicates a deliberate deception, which is a contradicting statement to be with God and also to be living in sin at the same time. Simply put, God is holy and cannot be associated with darkness and sin, which is why, if we are wanting to be in association with God, we are needing to walk with Him, not in darkness, as this verse puts it, but instead in light. Which is why this ninth commandment is something that is still important even today, that we are needing to still be following.